Let us then turn to Ben McKenzie, investigative journalist and actor, author of a new book called Easy Money, Cryptocurrency, Casino Capitalism, and the Golden Age of Fraud. You will know Mr. McKenzie from his time playing Ryan Atwood, as well as the books Ryan Atwood in the OC. Great to see you. Thank you so much for coming on. Tell us about what made you want to write this book, the story that you saw of cryptocurrency that really acted as a warning for you to make to other people.
Well, I tell the story in the book, but I had gone down the rabbit hole. I saw everyone getting rich on cryptocurrency. A friend of mine had come to me, so I'm sure many people have had this experience, and encouraged me to buy it. But I have a degree in economics, and I also have spent 20 years in Hollywood. So I know a little bit about money from econ, but I know about lying because I do it for a living. I'm an actor. And it felt like they were lying. So I was reading my daughter, who was 6 at the time, The Emperor's New Clothes. And I was struck by the fact that all of these adults had been tricked by the simplest con potentially ever, which is just, if you're not smart, if you're not of high station, if you're not brilliant, you can't see these imaginary clothes we weave. And that felt true of crypto. And the second thing was that at the height of the story, as the emperor gallivants through town naked, it's a child who calls out the lie. The only one brave enough to speak the truth is someone who doesn't know he's being brave. He's simply telling the truth. I found myself as that child. And that to me really speaks to what crypto is. I mean, your guest was just mentioning blockchain. You know, when companies start talking about things in very abstract manners and mention things like blockchain, which is a technology that's been around for over 30 years, you should immediately be suspicious because they're trying to sell you on a story, but that story may not be true.
So tell us where this investigation led you when you started getting down the rabbit hole of cryptocurrency. I think I'm right in saying you ended up interviewing Sam Bankman-Fried. Just explain a bit about how you got there and what his relationship with this story of cryptocurrency and perhaps the figment of cryptocurrency was.
Sure. So I started working with the journalist Jacob Silverman, and we started writing articles from a skeptical point of view about crypto in the fall of 2021 when crypto was at its height.
Yeah.
We sold the book in 2022. We started investigating in person and going to different conferences and meetups. By the time I interviewed Sam in July of 2022, he was being pitched as the savior of an industry that was already falling on hard times. He was being called the JP Morgan of crypto. He was going to buy up all these failing companies, and he was going to resuscitate this industry that was, still in its fledgling stages, but still remarkably innovative. That was the sales pitch. So when I sat with him, I was just struck by how empty it all was. I mean, he was being pitched as, well, we were told he was one of the 100 wealthiest people in the world, according to Bloomberg. He was this billionaire genius. And yet when I asked him very simple questions like, what does crypto do? Give me something that crypto does that actually provides utility, and he tried to talk about remittances, sending money across borders. But the problem was I had just been to El Salvador, which is a country that's heavily reliant on remittances, and people weren't using it. So that was baloney. And he tried to talk about payments methods and things like that. But all of it was so deeply, deeply unsatisfying that at the end of the day, well, I'll just say the chapter title devoted to that interview is The Emperor is Butt-Ass Naked. There was no there. It was just a story. It was really kind of remarkable. And sure enough, some months later, his empire falls apart and he's arrested for fraud.
But it's a heck of a tale because this is an industry in 2021 at its peak worth £3 trillion. People are, during the pandemic particularly too, pumping tons and tons of cash into this, because they are seeing this, well, it's called a currency, but I think that's a sort of odd way of describing it, really. The value is rocketing. Elon Musk's tweeting about it. Right, well, if it's not Bitcoin, it's Dogecoin. That thing's going to the moon. We've got to jump on this train as it goes up. And your warning call is based on what then? Based on this is actually, the value of this really is entirely sentiment.
Yes. I mean, it's based on facts. It's based on a simple understanding of economics. These are not currencies, as you were pointing out there, and they're not being used like currencies, right? People are putting real money into them, hoping to make real money off of them through no work of their own. That's an investment contract. Under American law, that should be considered a security. And yet, for reasons I go into in the book, Bitcoin had been classified as a commodity. All these other things were sort of nebulously They were sort of out there being sold to the general public as currencies, even though they weren't those. We have a really bad history in America, globally, of this. Before we had securities laws in the 1930s, we didn't have them. And in the 1920s, the roaring 20s, everyone was on paper rich, but the crash of 29 led to the Great Depression. So it felt like pretty ironic, but about 100 years later, we were revisiting a time before we had effective securities laws in this country.
So what would you say then to the people who will ring me up and say, well, I made money. I've done okay out of crypto. It's a heck of a ride, but I've done all right.
I say, great. I mean, I'm glad you had fun in Vegas. I'm glad you won. Doesn't mean that other people are going to win. Most people are going to lose. But I don't begrudge anybody who's made money. One thing that's important to understand about cryptocurrency is that it's a zero-sum game, meaning it's not additive overall value-wise. The money that you're making is just coming from someone else's pocket. I'm not saying that they took it directly from someone else's pocket, but the analogy here is poker, actually. An online poker is the best sort of antecedent to crypto. When you play money, when you play poker at a table, you and I could sit across the table. I might win a hand, you might win a hand, but we're just passing the value back and forth amongst ourselves. It's different than the stock market. In the stock market, companies issue stock. They take the money gained from that sale of stock and they can reinvest it in their company. If they have real products, real goods and services they're providing, then over time the stock market grows. It produces value. It's an efficient use of capital, or at least somewhat efficient. Crypto is just at best zero sum, and at worst worse than that, because again, you're not playing in a licensed casino. You're playing in an unregulated, unlicensed casino. FTX, headquartered in the Bahamas. Most of the volume in crypto runs through the overseas exchanges. So there's really no investor protections. So for the people that made money, I say great. But for the rest of us, and for the majority of people that lost money in crypto, here's a book, and maybe you'll learn something.
And your fury is evident. I mean, you're angry at the people who you see as complicit in sort of perpetuating this lie.
Yes, and I'm angry. I'm angry at them for spreading a lie. I'm angry at the powers that be for not shutting it down earlier.
You think it
this
should
thing
be
is
shut
so
down?
hollow and. Well, it should have been, at a minimum, we should have been enforcing our securities laws rigorously. There's this sort of gray area that crypto fell into. And I think, to be honest with you, regulators didn't take it that seriously for a long time.
And what about the celebrity element, the celebrity endorsement, which happened a lot?
Oh, it was terrible. It was horrible. I mean, I called up my fellow celebrities. It was the first article that Jacob and I wrote, saying it was a moral disaster, I think was the phrase. But at the end of the day, the celebrities were not the root problem. They were just the megaphone necessary at the end of the life cycle of a Ponzi, as it gets as big as possible. And crypto reached 40 to 50 million Americans, probably 10 million in the UK or more. You need the most famous people possible in order to sell it. So in a weird way, it felt like eventually they were going to run out of suckers, and sure enough, they did.
Fascinating to talk to you.